Hello, and welcome to today's VC Task Force Gary's Picks events for investors and startups. My name is Joel Rosenberg, Director of Business Development and Strategy for VC Task Force. VC Task Force is an organization where the venture community comes together to address critical issues, provide workshops and other events for the benefit of the venture and entrepreneurial communities. VC Task Force provides access to an extensive ecosystem of VCs, corporate VCs, and angel investors. You may ask questions anytime during today's event, and time permitting, they will be answered live after today's interview. It is my pleasure to welcome Gary's Picks host, Gary Fowler. Gary is CEO and co-founder of GSD Venture Studios, an award-winning growth stage AI venture studio. Gary is also co-founder of the award-winning AI startup Eva.ai, as well as the investment firm DY Investments. Today, Gary will be interviewing special guest, Robert Lauritzen, CEO and co-founder of Cerebriu. Cerebriu is an AI-driven precision diagnostics company significantly improving accuracy and efficiency of MR imaging. Robert is an international IT life sciences executive with 25 plus years of management experience across high-tech, MedTech, startups, and large corporations across pharma and IT service providers, building and managing global delivery and sales execution across Europe, US, and Asia. Take it away, Gary.
Thanks, Joel. Great having you here, Robert. So, Robert, you have this journey. How is it, to get started? You have 25 years with the experience in corporate to be able to go down through and do a startup. What are some of the differences that you see? I remember when I had a short stint in Hewlett Packard, there were a lot of politics, but how do you deal with that, and how's it different now in the startup community?
Well, thanks, Gary. That's a good question. There's a colossal difference in so many ways between corporate and startup. I was an entrepreneur in a startup in my 20s, and then went corporate and pharmaceutical companies, et cetera, for a couple of decades. And obviously, the most sort of the broadest change from the entrepreneurial environment to the corporate is that you have typically one main hat, one task, one role, one set of responsibilities, and you just execute in a colossal sort of cogwheel setup. Whereas when you're an entrepreneur, you have to do everything, right? You can say the E in CEO stands for Chief Everything Officer.
That's right.
You basically have to execute across all domains, and then gradually you can build your organization, trying to avoid the slump of corporate work style. So I think that's the big difference. And obviously, corporate comes with organizational policies and all that sort of built-in culture. So there's a lot of setting culture. There's a lot of driving the team and the enthusiasm that is significantly different when you're building from zero than when you're sort of entering a colossal like HP or anyone else for that matter.
So when you're going down through it, it's what's the population in Denmark right now? 5 million, 6 million? I mean, it's less than 10 million.
Just south of 6, yeah.
I mean, the situation is, how does it's not a large country, but come out with some incredible technologies? And, you speak, 4 languages, if I recall, from your LinkedIn profile, or 5, right?
Yeah. So I think Denmark has actually always been very entrepreneurial, very outbound. I guess, there are different variants on entrepreneurial or entrepreneurship. Back in, 1,000 years ago, we were a bit more brutal. We turned peaceful a lot faster than most other countries, given our small population. But I think we've always been very much outbound and networking and relationally building and entrepreneuring. And it's no different today. So we have a good, solid educational system, a strong, what we call social welfare system that makes a lot of stuff more equal. Everyone has equal opportunity to get high education. Everyone has equal opportunity to health. So that safety net makes it easier to spot talent and to culture talent than it does in many other countries. Of course, it's also slightly more difficult to get very rich. but in a lifetime, how much money do you need, right? So I think that's sort of the basic sort of approach that we have in Denmark, and we have world-leading universities, university hospitals that are on the top 20 world list, which is pretty impressive for nearly 6 million people population. But it's really driven by, I think, that old culture that we have, and we have companies that you probably know about, like Novo Nordisk, that are global leaders in the field of diabetic, therapeutics, and also now in obesity, which are some of the flagship companies that everyone knows or have heard about. So I think that's, but really it comes back to the kind of our outlook to humanity and doing better and really making sure that we use whatever talent we have in the small pool, which is like a city in any other country, right? So.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it's interesting because, dealing with, we have 153 companies in GSD now, as you know, right, from 59 countries. And I see vast differences in terms of the appetite from the venture capitalists, especially in places like Northern Europe. There's some pockets that are a little different, right? Like Finland's a little bit different, but still the money's not there. And it's kind of interesting to me, our German companies that we have, Austrian companies, the one thing is that they're a bit more conservative and they take first of all, they don't invest as much in general. They're more conservative and they take forever. And by the time they figure it out, the deal's already done and the train's past them, right? So how do you deal with that? Because you've got such incredible opportunity, Robert, for the world. I'm in San Jose, California, be in Palo Alto in a little bit. But I mean, the one thing is Silicon Valley is a port to the rest of the world. It's not a place where it's a mentality. It's a place where people go to raise money. It's a place where family offices and venture capitalists come to find great deals. But how do you do that? It's interesting because there's so much untapped opportunity out there. How do you get to that money? And how are you going to assure that you get the right kind of valuation?
Well, that's a good question. I think, so being in health tech, that's a bit more tough. I think digital health and health tech has been under severe pressure the past couple years after COVID. We have a long, strong standing tradition for biotech healthcare investments in the Nordics, and especially out of funds like from Novo Nordisk. But we do seek capital outside of the country. It's absolutely necessary. So I've been working with and talking to VCs across the globe, family offices across the globe, a lot also in the US. But going local, we would never get anywhere. I mean, we do have to seek capital. And I think the main attractiveness for us, obviously from a valuation perspective, is that we are very cost efficient. And therefore also have an attractive price.
And that's it. It's like getting your Ferrari out of the garage. You got to get the Ferrari out of the garage. So one thing for people to see it, I have a friend of mine. I'll never. Yeah, it's a sad story, but I remember he was so happy he had these two Ferraris. He had them like in a plexiglass enclosure. This is a real story, right? and he was telling me, "Oh, I got this." I said, "Have you driven it?" He said, "Like 3 miles." And I said, "Why don't you drive your?" This is a nice Ferrari too, right? And I said, "Why don't you drive your cars?" He said, "Oh, because these are my pieces of art." He said, "I'm going to drive them sometime. I'm going to drive them." And he comes back to me. I see him about 6 months later, and he's at a restaurant near my house. I live at the Polo Club in Florida, and beach. And he comes back and says, "It's bad." And I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "I'm getting a divorce, and my wife wants my cars." And I was like, and I said, first of all, why didn't he think about his wife first? But he's telling me about his cars, right? And I said, "What's going on?" He said, "I've never gotten to drive the cars. I was just telling you a story." Drive. And, even 2 miles, right? He didn't really drive his cars. The point is, you got to do it. There's no time like the present. You got to get it out and you got to test it. And then the most important thing is not getting it out in the neighborhood is winning the race because nobody else cares. What do you need? You need the right pit crew, you need the right driver, you need the right aerodynamics. Of course, if you have sponsors that'll come in and help you, that's critically important. And, 90% of it, as you know, being a corporate executive is storytelling. 90% of building $1 billion company is a kind of story. You can have a mediocre product and end up dominating the space just because you're a great storyteller, and the investors will come in and start shaping you into the direction you need to become.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, that's so true. And I think, Gary, I mean, that the analogy to the car is actually quite spot on, right? So we actually have a lot of great colleagues also in our space in the Nordics that make fantastic products, but everyone's struggling to get just drip feeding from investors, and they're not going to get anywhere because it's just too expensive to go abroad, and especially to go across to the US. It requires colossal investments. But I think it's, to your point, back to the storytelling, but also getting access to those sponsors that will help that make that possible future a reality. And that's just hard work. I mean, it's the CEO's job. I just actually counted before going into this call, saying, I wonder how many investor-related meetings I've actually had the past 12 months, and it's north of 300. That's just reality. It is a lot of meetings.
What are they saying, Robert, when you talk to them? What do they say?
Well, I mean, so quite often it's like fantastic idea, fantastic this, that, and the other, and a great team. You have a fantastic board. Everything is really checking off the boxes, and then depending on where you are, it's like, where is Denmark, or how does governance work in Denmark, or what are the tax issues in Denmark, or whatever down the line. Or it's related to, I wonder what commercial traction is, and that actually sounds really exciting, but where does that bring us in terms of an exit? And I think that sort of bridging from a Nordic or even to some extent European, but getting that sort of sense from a US investor perspective, typically the feedback is they're driven to how do you get to an exit and have that top-down thinking that the US have. I typically look at US and Europe and in the perspective that European investors think a lot bottom-up, and US investors think a lot top-down. So it's about how does the exit look? How do we make that look really exciting? What's the story, and who would want to buy you? Where the European investors looking at how are you going to get revenue, how are you going to get profits, what is the maximum growth rate you can have over years, and at which point will you hit a likely revenue that may be a point where somebody want to acquire you. It's a completely different approach. Right?
I agree. And I see it. It's interesting because people like yourself start coming over to the Valley, and we look at Silicon Valley as a port to the rest of the world. They come here with these great ideas and they don't leave, right? So what happens is you see there's a reason why, probably 30, 40, maybe more are from other countries coming into Silicon Valley because they have dreams and they want to realize these dreams. It's kind of interesting right now, in terms of generative AI, in terms of digital health, there's a huge upsurge in opportunity. The family office have become more directly engaged. Right now, VC Task Force, which is a premier, June is like the godmother of VC in Silicon Valley, just FYI. So, I mean, but we got to get the word out. A lot of it's getting the word out. And one of the other things I see a lot with the companies, the Northern European companies, they're very modest. They don't want to talk about what they have, right? They're like, oh, we got this, we've got digital health product, we got remote patient monitoring, but I don't really excite you with it. As my friend Guy Kawasaki says, you got to chanting,
I totally agree on that. And we're big on H.C. Andersen, as you may, the storyteller with the mermaid and all that. So we come from a storytelling company or culture, and we have also the Yancey's Law, which is very much about you're not better than anyone else, which is like completely opposite to the approach that we have in the US. You're a champion first, and then you sort of try to see if you can level out with the rest. So
there's like what is it? Regression towards the mean, right? Everybody comes in and everybody.
Exactly. Yeah, start there, just look around. And this is, as I started with the Viking story, we're from a social welfare culture, so it's really it's all about the mass. It's all about making sure that everyone feels good and we're peaceful people. But it also sort of makes it slightly difficult from a culture perspective to break out and say, wait a minute, I'm great. What we're doing is fantastic. We'll change the world. Because then the rest will look like you're not really fitting in here, are you? Why don't you
Well,
just do
that's one of the things, right? So how do you deal with that? Because that's like diametrically opposed to entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It is. Well, I guess, I mean, from my perspective, I think it helps a lot to make sure to have a lot of interactions in the US. So half my board is from the US. Boston, not so much Silicon Valley, but it's important because they keep challenging this approach, right? It's like what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. It is groundbreaking. It will change the world, and you got to tell that story because talking about whether we can incrementally increase something and eventually become profitable is super boring. Right? It doesn't save lives. It doesn't change anything. It's just incremental, and it's just not exciting enough. So I think that is really important. And for those around you, you should also when meeting the likes of us and the likes of me, it's also about having that filter and don't discount at the usual 80% rate because actually we're inherently modest, and it can be a strength, but it's also, of course, if you're discounting everything by 80%, it'll be a walk away immediately.
That's so let's talk about the company. Tell us a little bit about how you're going to change the world and make it an incredibly better place.
Yeah, I'd love to, Gary. I think it's that's why I'm in the company. That's why I started the company with my co-founders, really looking around in healthcare in general, and societal cost and impact on well-being. I think it's quite obvious that the ability to diagnose disease is critical to treat, right? And we have been looking into and started the company really because we saw that a vast majority, more than 90% of the global population actually do not have access to advanced diagnostic medical imaging, which is critical for the treatment of cancer, it's critical for treatment of stroke or any sort of cardiovascular disease, including hemorrhages, etc. So all this, you need this kind of modality to really get into. But the problem is when you have the current healthcare professional sort of amount of staff available, where you have the amount of advanced diagnostic imaging like MR available, to actually get to that remaining affordably get to the remaining 7 billion people that don't have access, you would need another 5 million radiologists and MR techs. You would need another 400,000 MRI machines, which is just not going to happen. I mean, it'll take half a century. It would cost gazillions. And it's just not possible to create. I mean, that's more than there are even medical doctors across all clinical specialties. So our mission really in life is to make sure that every disease can be revealed in time. And our approach to that is saying that instead of, now we've had MRI for half a century, we're building a future through automation of the MRI where we can get MRI, autonomous MRI for everyone on the planet. And we can do that by making the MRI machines clinically intelligent so that it can be operated by low competence, trained staff and not these advanced MR techs, that we can really personalize and be super accurate on the imaging data that the medical doctors get so they don't spend all their time or most of their time looking at health images as today, so that we can get through greatly increased throughput. So going towards a 5-minute scan, ruling out and being able to screen any population anywhere in the world. And it's not just a developing country problem. This is a problem in Europe. We have, months or years waiting lists because we have a public healthcare system. So everyone can afford it, but they sometimes die before they get there. In the US, you just have to be.
Robert, how did they deal with that, by the way? Do you have like private medicine? I know here we have concierge doctors and all that, where you can go in and get to a top person very quickly. Do you have that same kind of a two-tiered system where you have like this elite kind of healthcare where you can get in right away? It just costs a lot more money.
You can. I mean, so money you can with if you have money, but that's the problem. If you're looking at it from a global healthcare perspective and health equity perspective,
Right.
so if you have enough money, you can always get stuff.
Yeah.
And this is in Europe. So there are private practices, but in Denmark, for instance, 99% of healthcare is public. So it's really just the elite that have that kind of affordable access to healthcare. We are gradually getting some level of private insurance that will gradually move us towards a US-based setup, but hopefully never reach that state, because I think the US also uses more than twice the GDP on healthcare than in Denmark, right? So it's an incredibly expensive beast to build up that level of service. But you can get access if you have money also in Europe. But even in the US, if you're not looking at the upper middle class and up that have it, all the insurance is in place and sort of with a reasonable amount of self-payment, it's actually not really affordable, but it's also becoming a challenge to get the high level of service that you're used to, even with the payments, right? Because you have medical professionals that are getting anxious because they're running faster and faster, and they're increasing the misdiagnosis rate, and because the volume is just exceeding whatever, and they're exceeding the normal sort of turnaround time, which is where they're capturing stuff, which is hitting them on the liability issue, which is a different paradigm than in Denmark, but it's something that's actually hurting the healthcare system. So looking at autonomous AI technology that can present immediately while you're in the scanner, this is what we're doing, right? While you're in the scanner, after 5 minutes, we can see if you have critical disease or not, and we can alert the healthcare practitioner. We can make sure that you don't leave that facility before somebody's had a discussion with you and you know what's going to happen with you, which of course provides superior care. But we can also help ensure that the technologists get the imaging right the first time. And this is just a massive paradigm shift that's going to change the future. Really, the future of this kind of advanced diagnostic imaging technology is that it's available for anyone, anywhere, and can be operated by pretty much any healthcare practitioner without the high level of skill required today. Sort of like a smartphone. Anyone can actually make pretty great pictures with this device now, so it's completely democratized. Obviously, a magnet, is a bit more expensive than a phone. Just the hardware itself is not going to be as available, but
just a little bit.
Slightly. But that's really the future, I think. And we're working with the biggest manufacturer in the world. We've made a distributor partnership that will be hitting the market with launching with Siemens Healthineers at the end of the year.
That's great. Siemens is going to be your partner, or is your partner.
Siemens is our partner. We're non-exclusive, so we're also working with the other OEMs. The big ones are like, it's a small OEM market, but the big ones are Siemens, GE, and Philips. They have pretty much the entire global market. But we're also partnering with lower field emerging technology companies like Hyperfine or other, testing out, seeing if it works, because this is what will change the mass access. I mean, the rural imaging somewhere 100 miles from a large city where they actually have an MRI, you can have these small portable MRIs that can actually make sure that if you're having a stroke or a tumor, that you're actually caught early on and they can get timely treatment. And that's really what we want to do. Right? That is what will improve healthcare. That is what will improve the quality of life and the length of your life.
No, that's great. So we're coming up to the top of the show. So for other companies that are out there in the digital health space, what are some words of wisdom for them, and how can people get a hold of you?
So I think, so first of all, just from start, think global, because, and especially in digital health and medical technology, where it's not in biotech and pharma, a lot of companies that I meet, they tend to look at their local market or their neighboring markets, and then no matter what you do, the metrics just don't add up to something that will scale and attract the attention of a VC. So you have to think global. You have to take the onset of $1 billion company, because if you can't do that math, it's just, you're not going to get the attention. And I guess, that's the core of it, right? And if people are interested in talking to me, I'm available. I'm the CEO of Cerebriu. I go to conferences, and I'm a call away. WhatsApp, go on our website, shoot me an email at rl or robert@cerebriu.com, and I'll happy to take a call and talk about the opportunity.
Yeah, now that sounds good. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule today to join and joining us. And thanks to all the viewers out there for joining us one more time for Gary's Picks. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. We'll be back to you again soon. Joel?
Yeah, thanks, Gary, for another excellent interview. Robert, really, really insightful information there. Really great for our viewers. And of course, very timely. What you're working on is absolutely critical for humanity, I would say. So that's wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Then we'll see you back here in 2 weeks for the next edition of Gary's Picks. Until then, stay well. Take care now.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.